are listening to the Narrated, Not the Popular Opinion with the one and only Gray. Greetings, opinion nerds. It is I, the one they call Gray, and today in the Gray area, we're going to get mysterious and spooky about the value of an IP with Netflix's new Addams Family adaptation, Wednesday, coming up right now. The value of an IP can be measured in more than just dollars, opinion nerds. If it seems like you could throw a brick in any direction in Hollywood and hit 10 or 15 people working on some existing IP or another, you're probably not too far from the truth. IP farming seems to be overtaking grapes as the largest agricultural product in the Golden State, and it doesn't take an Andy Beckstoffer to understand why. Existing IPs require less development than original works. They're recognizable and market tested. Some of them have already been previously refined for their more useful elements. More importantly, the right IP will already have an existing fan base you can stir up for support, at least until you let them know what exactly it is you're doing. The downside to IP farming is that fans of that IP can be a little, let's say, protective of the material. If you can get them on your side, you're in good shape, but that usually means limiting your creative output to some variation of something that's already been done so as not to offend, while adding as much of whatever currently socially accepted themes and depictions you can get away with to keep both wings of the culture war off your back. Farming can be dangerous enough work, but there is little more dangerous in entertainment programming than pissing off an ideological activist group. One of the latest IPs to be dug up, all puns intended from here on out, is the venerable Addams Family franchise. Charles Addams' creations have been in the public sphere in one form or another for the better part of 80 years, starting as a series of comic strips in the New Yorker before branching out into television, film, animation, other comics, video games. You name it, and the Addams Family has probably been there. While a 2009 Addams Family musical is still touring the world, the last 3 years alone have seen the launch of two major new projects, a duology of not impressively received animated films, and a new live-action adaptation focusing on the Addams daughter, Wednesday. It would be difficult to say we're in the middle of a full-blown Addams revival, but the surefire merchandise potential of Wednesday's Addams Family meets Harry Potter setup is sure to set your local Hot Topic ablaze with purple and black striped blazers, thick-soled Mary Janes, and black baby doll dresses with big white collars. Developed for Netflix by Alfred Goff and Miles Miller, the powerhouse creative duo behind the Shanghai Noon series of films, the development of the Smallville TV series, and part of the veritable army of writers on Monster High the movie, the duo have tapped longtime Addams chaser Tim Burton to direct and executive produce the series. The series sees Jenna Ortega's teenage Wednesday not only cast firmly in the mold of Christina Ricci's version of the character from the 90s Barry Sonnenfeld films, but elevating her emotionally detached pseudo-psychopathy sent to Nevermore, a boarding school for outsiders, basically an academy for werewolves, vampires, sirens, and other supernatural freaks the world seems to be aware of, but otherwise doesn't care much about. Within the walls of the Poe-themed academy, you'll find the typical YA arrangement of moody teenage drama with a twist of murder mystery as Wednesday attempts to uncover the secret of the monster afflicting the nearby town, find out why her father Gomez, played by Luis Guzman, was accused of murder, and get to the bottom of a prophecy that places her smack dab in the middle of a Nevermore-centric disaster. The first season's story is a combination of Wednesday dealing with a vow never to be like her married, child-having housewife of a mother, Morticia, played by Catherine Zeta-Jones, while discovering it's okay to let down the cold-as-the-grave demeanor that keeps her separate from everyone else. No Addams is an island is the lesson here, though Wednesday might just be a peninsula attached by a very thin land bridge. From archery to martial arts to dance to hitting high notes that shatter glass over 100 yards away, there isn't anything that Wednesday can't do, except for the one thing the plot needs her not to be able to do in the first episode, along with making friends, the one thing her repellent personality is specifically designed to prevent. We also find that while Gomez has always been portrayed as the family swordsman, it was Morticia who was captain of the fencing team and overall overachiever during their time at Nevermore. So yeah, it's another one of those kind of shows. And as far as these kinds of shows go, it's not bad. It might be hard to feel the Burton in all this, which is certainly a letdown for a director usually possessed of such a strong creative vision, but if you like this kind of thing, you can hardly go wrong. In fact, what might end up being the weakest part of the whole affair is the thing that was arguably meant to make it unique. See, you could just about remove anything related to the Addams Family IP from the show, and not only would nothing change, it would never be mistaken for the Addams Family. Charles Addams' original strips were a humorously satirical look at everyday life from the perspective of a macabre family of weirdos. The 1964 television series, where after almost 30 years the members of the family finally got names, was a decidedly sillier yet no less poignant look at a loving family in the modern world. Even the 90s film series placed all of its emphasis on the family as a whole. Through all those incarnations, a few key elements have remained consistent: the closeness of the family, the experience of the Addams clan juxtaposed against the normal world around them, and their virtual obliviousness to the idea that they are in any way different from anyone else. When it comes to adapting or reinterpreting an already existing IP, there are a few questions one has to consider, such as what it is that makes the IP unique, what new ideas you can bring to that IP, and whether or not those ideas add to or detract from the IP's uniqueness. There are always interesting avenues one can take to change things up, either exaggerating certain aspects of the material for additional effect or shifting the context to something more humorous or more dramatic than it had originally been in order to present it in a new way. But the question will always end up being, are we giving to or taking from the original material, and what value is there in that? After all, what is the point of taking on the IP if the things that make it what it is aren't being used meaningfully? So, what are the choices that Goff and Miller make with their adaptation? Well, the first thing they do is they separate Wednesday from the family while creating an antagonism between the young teen and her parents. This splintering of the family dynamic, key in virtually every other version of the IP, is curious but in its way allowable. After all, the show is called Wednesday and not specifically branded as an Addams Family piece. It's rather like titling Henry Cavill's first outings as Superman Man of Steel instead of calling it Superman with some kind of modifier. It asks you to set an expectation that this new work will be in some way significantly different from those others. However, one difference is that if you removed any of the Superman-specific references from Man of Steel, like names, locations, and specifically identifiable iconography, there's a better than likely chance that anyone familiar with Superman would look at the film and say, hey, that's just Superman with another name. If you were to remove the Addams iconography from Wednesday and keep everything else the same, it's difficult to argue that anyone would peg the show for its Addams Family roots. Now, this can be chalked up to how the Addams Family formula has been diluted over the years, but recognizing that the removal or downplaying of more important elements of the family portrayal means that the iconography is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in making the show recognizably Addams. Perhaps the most significant deviation from the original IP is the removal of the satirical juxtaposition of the Addams against the normal world and setting the material in a Hogwarts-style boarding school for outsiders, itself existing in a world where the normies are very much aware of the existence of supernatural beings. However, in order to maintain the necessary stranger in a strange land point of moving Wednesday away from the family, the show has to exaggerate her outsider traits in order to allow the audience to share the perspective of her being an outsider among outsiders. It accomplishes this by making the Addams penchant for the dark and spooky, despite themselves not being specifically supernatural beings, strange and off-putting to the other outsiders. It furthers this by making Wednesday herself exceptionally arrogant, dismissive, antisocial, and resistive to anything she considers conformist in any way. This is assisted by the fact that the Nevermore student body, while made up of supernatural creatures of one form or another, have no unique cultures, traditions, or practices between them. They are, for all intents and purposes, behaviorally like any other group of people. But even though they are genuine outliers from the typical human experience in a way that Wednesday is not, the other kids don't treat her as a tourist in their world. She isn't an outsider among them because they are genuine freaks and she only acts like one. They just think she's kind of a bitch, until it's time for them not to think that. In truth, the Addams IP has become increasingly more Wednesday-centric since the 1991 film positioned her as the more interesting of the Addams children, and Ricci went on to greater acclaim as an actress. Both the 91 film and its sequel, Addams Family Values, placed a lot of emphasis on Wednesday, and the 2019 animated feature hit a lot of the same character notes as the Netflix series. Some of this can be attributed to the general rise of the spooky girl aesthetic that has evolved in ever more cartoonishly gloomy fashion for teenage girls in search search of rebellion at a reasonable price. And let's be honest, it can be fun to dress up as Lurch or Fester or Cousin It, and there are some who find Gomez's look compelling such as it is. But everyone wants to be either Goth Mama Morticia or Gloomy Girl Wednesday. You split the difference and you get what we have now. If anything, the real victim in this is poor Pugsley, who's been pushed so far down the line of importance that his debut in the Netflix series sees him bullied, tied up, and shoved into a locker for Wednesday to save. Wednesday continues the diminishment of that character for the purpose of bolstering his sister's pop appeal, something this show has unfortunately allowed to creep into the other characters as well. Divorced from the IP, the construction of the show still works. The conceit of a world separated into outsiders and normies is the perfect end for virtually any supernatural teen school drama. Goff and Miller began working on breaking the show and plotting it out before they even acquired the rights to the Adam properties, so it's reasonable to assume that their initial approach may have given them the leeway to construct material that followed the same premise, but wasn't based specifically around the Adams property. This may cast a light on their credit for the Monster High movie being developed at the same time, despite seemingly having no other involvement with the franchise. There really isn't any Adam-centric element of the show that can't be written around, even the inclusion of fan-favorite handyman Thing, whose role could be filled by virtually any kind of supernatural or sentient pet. Wednesday's newfound psychic abilities, the history of the school and the town it's in, and her parents' relationship to it, none of these elements are part of or rely on the Adams IP. This isn't something that anyone has done wrong, no one has broken any rules, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying the show just because you like it. All of this is just about asking again, why acquire the IP if the IP isn't being used in a meaningful way? Understand, this has nothing to do with whether or not Wednesday is entertaining. In fact, the only thing the show is required to do is to be entertaining, and it accomplishes that. Not spectacularly, but well enough, while apparently riding on the slim shoulders of Star Ortega, who has captured the attention of a young audience who celebrate her success as a peer. The question here is, what is the transverse value of the IP? It's easy to see what the IP brings to the production, instant and widespread recognition that will lead to easy access to licensing channels. But what value do the changes made for this adaptation bring to the Addams Family as an idea? Do they enrich the Addams Family property as a whole by bringing it to the attention of a current generation of merchandise-hungry youths who will certainly buy Nevermore-themed blazers and sweaters and Wednesday makeup kits? Or does the angsty teenage mystery melodrama approach file the show in line with other recent adaptations like Riverdale and Nancy Drew that haven't exactly set the world on fire? The show has put up impressive numbers for its first season, apparently shattering all kinds of viewing records while making an alright showing with critics. Audiences, at least those that are talking about the show, appear to really dig it, so as long as they don't pounce the piranha in the second season, this could go on for a while. With the more kid-friendly animated films experiencing quickly diminishing returns, this is how Charles Addams' morbid mob of misunderstood misfits will be seen for the foreseeable future. But if every new version of the sadistic sitcom continues the exaggeration of elements begat by the Sonnenfeld films and exacerbated by Wednesday, it'll be difficult to see the value in the family side of the Addams. Depending on age, IP farming can be almost like archaeology. You're digging up something from the past and trying to understand how it was created, how it was used, and what it meant at the time, with the added task of trying to find a new way it can be repurposed. The Addams Family trademark is owned by the T. and Charles Addams Foundation, which is, according to their charter, dedicated to preserving the work of Charles Addams. So in a very real way, as long as the foundation persists, the original concept of the Addams Family will never pass into obscurity. But as a product of its time, maybe there should come a point where we stop digging up the family's corpse and trotting it out to perform for company. Maybe the property itself is only useful for dissection, its component parts sewn together with elements of other pop culture successes in an attempt to construct some image of its former self. Maybe it really is time to let the property rest in peace, only visiting it to reminisce about the times we once shared. Or maybe a show like Wednesday is just the shock needed to give it new life. See, IP farming doesn't always yield a great harvest, and more often than not, you just end up with dirt under your fingernails. But if you're smart, or lucky, and you focus on the right elements at just the right time, you might find yourself grimly reaping the rewards of a successful resurrection. This has been the Narrated, Not the Popular Opinion. As always, I have been Gray, and if you like what you heard, you can leave a tip at our Ko-Fi page at ko-fi.com/notthepopularopinion. You can follow us on Twitter at only_gray, and don't forget our main page at notthepopularopinion.wordpress.com, where you'll find more great articles just like this. Thanks again for listening, and remember, if you're as good to others as you are to yourself, we might just make it through this mess. See ya.